going to kick off the webinar. So welcome everybody to Free Money for Local School Food, a webinar that will cover an overview of farm to school grants from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. We're so excited. We have a good list of attendees today. I know a lot of people are really interested and excited to hear about what's happening with the new round of grants that's open right now. So we have a really good list of presenters to share with you today. So we're going to have some presenters from MDA that can give the details about the grant. We have Kate and Emily, and they can answer your questions about the logistics. They can give you the technical information. That'll be really, really helpful. And then we're very excited to have two previous grantees who are going to share their experience. And we were just talking before the webinar. I think our goal today is to really inspire you and have you think about what's possible with this grant. And I think when you hear about what they've been able to do, Kathy and Maria are going to tell us about their own grant experiences, and it's very exciting. And then I'm Erin. I'm from the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. I'm going to just share a little bit of technical assistance opportunities that we have to support you. We can help you apply. We can help you when you get your project. We're here and we're really excited to support this really big round of grants coming up. We are recording the webinar today, so we'll make a recording of this available after the fact. You can review it. You don't have to furiously take notes while people are talking. You can share it with your friends. It's going to be great. And then for housekeeping stuff, if you want to ask questions of the presenters, we will have a Q&A time at the end. The best way to do it would be if you can share in the Q&A function on Zoom. So if you look down by where the mute button and the stop video button, etc., are for you, you'll see a Q&A section. If you put it there, that helps keep track of it and helps track whether we've answered it or not. If you put it in the chat, we'll probably see it too. So we'll try to keep track of the questions and then bring them up and direct them to the right panelist at the end as well. So we're really excited to share a little bit about how to apply, and I am going to pass it over to Kate to give us a bit of an overview on the grant itself. So thanks so much for being here, Kate.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. As Erin mentioned, we're really excited to be able to share with all of you this afternoon or about the fiscal year 2023 Farm to School grant. So I'm going to share a bit of an overview on kind of what's new this year with the grants, and then my colleague Emily Mayer will share some of the details around the different options that you can apply for and kind of how it all works. So here at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, we think farm to school is a really important part of how we strengthen our local and regional markets, and we've been supporting farm to school in many ways since about 2013. And so many of you may have heard of our farm to school grants in the past or been previous recipients. We've funded farm to school in a variety of ways over the last decade or so through equipment grants. We used to also have a grant for feasibility studies and farm to school planning. Perhaps you applied for a milk cooler grant at one point. And then most recently, we've now had reimbursement grants for schools to purchase Minnesota grown and raised foods. And so that brings us to right now with our fiscal year 2023 grants that are currently open. And we are really excited because we have 4 times the funding that we did last year to grant to school districts to expand their local purchasing. And so we're really glad that you're all on here today to learn about how you can apply and to help you start thinking about what you can put into your proposal. So this is just a snapshot of our fiscal year 2022 grant recipients. So last year we awarded $741,000 through the First Bite and Full Trade grants, which you'll learn a bit about later on from Emily. And then we also had equipment grants. And as you can see, they were spread all across the state, and these are who our recipients were. And now we're really excited to be able to hopefully expand that map that you saw to reach new schools across the state who receive funding to support their farm to school purchasing. So through the USDA, the state of Minnesota was able to apply for and has now received $3.5 million through the Local Food for Schools Cooperative Agreement Program. And this is a program that the USDA had offered to all states to apply for, to provide funding to purchase local food for distribution to schools. And that funding can only be spent on food. And specifically unprocessed and minimally processed food. So the MDA put together a proposal to the USDA to use this $3.5 million of funds that were available to the state of Minnesota to expand our farm to school grant program. And so that $3.5 million will be combined with the about $740,000 that we have in state funding for farm to school. And all of that will be used to award both food grants and equipment grants this year. And there's a specific focus for the Local Food for Schools program, and then also our farm to school grants on working with emerging farmers and small businesses. And so we'll share a bit more about that. But the purpose of Local Food for Schools is to strengthen local and regional food systems, expand economic opportunities for socially disadvantaged producers, and increase consumption of local food. And so we're really excited to be able to work on those program goals through this grant with all of you then through our farm to school grants. And so I'll pass it to Emily to then share about a bit more about how these grants will work this year.
Thanks, Kate. My name is Emily Mayer. I manage the farm to school grants with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. So I might have worked with some of you already as you're submitting reimbursements, or maybe potentially for this future round of funding. So for this year, as Kate mentioned, we're really excited. We have a lot of money available to support farm to school programs throughout the state. So there's the $3.5 million with the Local Food for Schools that Kate was talking about. And then we have almost $750,000 available through state farm to school funds for equipment purchases that support farm to school initiatives and programs within the school. So important things to remember. The application deadline for this round of funding is 4 p.m. on November 17th, 2022. So put that in your calendars, make a note of that. It'd be great to apply well before that deadline, so it's not down to the wire. And then just for your planning purposes, funds will be available until January 19th of 2024, because this is the Local Food for School funds. That is a hard deadline. In previous years that there's been a little wiggle room, but just keep that in mind. If you're interested in applying or you would like more information, our website is there on the screen. That link will take you to the general farm to school grant page, and then there's 2 separate pages for the different programs that we're offering. And then just keeping in mind that the purpose of these grants is to increase the amount of Minnesota grown and raised foods used in school nutrition programs. So this visual here is just to show sort of how the funds all shake out. So we have our full pool of funding, which is over $4 million, and that's going to be funneled through 2 grants. So we have the First Bite grant and the Full Tray grant. Those are to purchase food for your school nutrition programs. And then if you apply for one of those food grants, then you are also eligible to apply for one of the equipment grants. And those you can apply for up to $35,000 for equipment purchases in your school kitchens. Also, that purple bubble down there in the bottom, that is a second helping food request that you can ask for if you are applying for the Full Tray grant. And I will go into a little more detail about all of these, but this is just a good visual. So the First Bite grant, this is for schools who are new to farm to school. They're just starting their programs, trying to figure out how to make those connections with farmers, how to serve this food in their cafeterias. So this grant is up to $10,000 per school district. There's no match required. We're looking for focus on intentional high impact farm to school efforts. And letters of support are not required for this grant, with the idea that you're just just starting to build those relationships with farmers. So you might not know who you're purchasing from when you apply, but knowing that, you know, you will have a relationship later on. So, next slide. Yep. So then we have the full trade grant. This grant is for schools who have some farm to school experience. Maybe you received a First Bite grant in previous rounds of funding. Maybe you have your own sort of separate farm to school program that you've built over the years. So if that's you, then the full trade grant would be a good opportunity. This year, we have up to $100,000 available for schools. This is based off of the number of meals that you served in October of 2021. So we have this little nifty equation. So it's the number of meals served times 20 cents per meal times 10 months equals the amount that you're eligible to apply for. So if you look at the example that's on the screen there, there's 7,500 lunches, 5,000 breakfasts that were served in October of 2021 times 20 cents per meal times 10 months. This applicant would be eligible to request up to $25,000. New this year, there's no match required for full trade grants. In years past, there was a match requirement, so that's huge for people who are applying for full trade grants this year. And this grant also has letters of support are required because we know that you do have those established relationships already. So we want to ensure that who you're purchasing from, they're involved in the planning, they're part of the process of your application. So then, as I mentioned earlier, we are also offering second helping food funds. This is available only to full tray applicants. So if you're applying for First Bite, unfortunately, you cannot request second helping food funds. But the idea behind this is that if there are additional funds left over after we've awarded First Bite and full trade grants, then we will open it up to schools who have requested this additional funding. So schools can request up to an additional $50,000 beyond what they requested for their full tray award. So like the example that we talked about with the school being eligible for $25,000, they could potentially request up to $75,000. The applications, you're gonna write in your request for funding as a part of the application, and it's funds will be awarded if they're left over, if there's any funds remaining. It'll be based off of the information that was included in your full tray application, as well as your plans for how you will use these second helping food funds. If you have any questions about how this may or may not relate to your school, feel free to reach out to me. So a question we get asked all the time is, what can I use these funds for? Foods must be grown or raised in Minnesota. So if you're in a bordering community, you need to just make sure that who you're purchasing from is Minnesota based. And then foods that are unprocessed or minimally processed. So food categories would be fruits and vegetables, meats, fish, and poultry, dairy products, except for fluid milk. Eggs are eligible, beans, and local grains. Items that are not eligible, fluid milk, as I just mentioned, produce from your school garden, products that have been processed, such as hot dogs, pre-made smoothies, granola. That's a little bit of a shift from previous years, so just make sure that you're aware of that for this year. Items that were grown or produced in a state other than Minnesota, and then items that were purchased for a meal or snack program outside of the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program. So that was sort of the overview of the food portion of these grants. So then we also have that almost $750,000 available for equipment purchases. So equipment would be items that you need to buy, prepare, and serve more Minnesota grown and raised foods in your school meal programs. So applicants can request up to $35,000 in addition to what they requested with their First Bite and full tray grant requests. Equipment, it does require a one-to-one match. So this can either be through additional local food purchases or paying 50% of the cost of the equipment that you're purchasing. We fully recognize this is a lot of info and maybe a little confusing. The match is always a little confusing as well. So please reach out to me with questions. And then also just keeping in mind that the goal of these projects is to enhance and expand existing procurement and consumption of Minnesota grown and raised foods served in your school lunch programs and breakfast programs. So on the screen here, we have a few ideas of things that you can try in your school to either start or grow or expand your farm to school program. Obviously, you don't need to do all of these things, but picking one or two things if you're brand new, or building off of a few of these if you already have existing farm to school programs. And we're happy to share more information about what some of this stuff means if you're totally new to farm to school. And I will also just say that if you would like to see an example of an application that was selected for funding from previous rounds of funding, please reach out to me and we can supply you with that to help you with your grant writing process.
Great, thanks, Emily. And then I'm just going to share a little bit about impact on Minnesota agriculture. So in the application, we'll be looking for, as Emily mentioned, that impact on increasing access to local food in schools. And then there will also be a question you'll see on how your project will positively impact Minnesota agriculture and specifically socially disadvantaged and emerging farms in Minnesota. So as Emily mentioned, in order for food to be reimbursed through this grant, it needs to be grown or raised in the state of Minnesota. And while this is, a one-time or, a one-year grant that you will be receiving, the intent for this funding is to really help kind of support and, spur the establishment of relationships between farms and schools that can hopefully continue on, in the future beyond this one-year grant. And so we really encourage you to think about how to start building those relationships and investing in those relationships during this grant period. So one of the priorities, both for the USDA and their local Food for Schools program, which is providing the funding this year for these farm to school grants, and then also a priority of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, is to support projects that will purchase from socially disadvantaged and emerging farmers. And here at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, we're working with our emerging farmers to support, increasing access to new markets, including schools. And so you have maybe heard the term emerging farmers before. Maybe you've read the definition in the grant RFP, which we do have the full definition of both socially disadvantaged and emerging farmers in that grant application. But we really just wanted to spend a couple minutes today talking about when we talk about socially disadvantaged and emerging farmers, what do we mean and what are we looking for in your grant application? Really, socially disadvantaged and emerging farmers include farmers of color, American Indian or Alaskan Native farmers, women-owned farm, veteran-owned farm, farmers with disabilities, young or beginning farmers, LGBTQ+ farmers, and urban farmers. And so really these terms encompass individuals who are perhaps, new and just getting started in farming, but also individuals who have perhaps been farming for generations, but did not have the opportunities to access the same traditional state or federal agricultural support programs. And so this is a real opportunity when we think about farm to school to help provide emerging farmers and socially disadvantaged farmers with opportunities to grow their business in connection with building farm to school programs and increasing student access to Minnesota grown and raised foods. So I encourage you, as you're thinking about your grant proposal, to to be intentional about reaching out to emerging farmers in your area, or reaching out to organizations or food hubs who may have connections with emerging farmers to see if there's opportunities to work together. A common question we get is like, is there an established list of emerging farmers in our state? And there is not, a single list, and many farmers would, may fall into the grouping of an emerging farmer or socially disadvantaged farmer, and maybe, wouldn't use that term to describe themselves. But really, the best way is to just start building relationships with the farmers in your community and be intentional about trying to build new relationships as you go. And so we have some resources that we'll share in a moment. But one thing I also want to note is that, grant recipients for this grant, they can be buying food directly from a farmer. They could also be buying it from an aggregator. So for instance, a food hub like the Good Acre or Sprout or the Minnesota Farmers Market food hubs that are bringing together product from multiple farms, and then distributing it to schools or other places. And aggregators are a really great way to build connections with emerging farmers in our state and tap into kind of an existing network of farmers and be able to buy farm to school products from multiple farms in your area. And then similarly, you can also, purchase from a distributor. So maybe you're already working with your distributor and they're able to identify Minnesota grown and raised products for you. That's also acceptable for this grant. So when you're working to build connections directly with farmers, one great resource for you to go to is the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory. And this is a searchable map of farms that have a Minnesota Grown license in the state. And Minnesota Grown is just a promotional marketing program that the Minnesota Department of Agriculture operates. And so farms may use the Minnesota Grown logo to promote themselves. And so if you go to the wholesale directory, the farms listed in that are all farms that are interested or perhaps already selling to wholesale customers, which would include schools. And so you can search in there by items. You might search carrots. You can set the search distance, based on where you are, and find, who in your area is interested in selling wholesale carrots. And you can do that for a variety of different products. So if you're looking to just find some new farms in your area to reach out to, the wholesale directory is a great place to start. But as I mentioned, this really is about building relationships. And so I would also encourage you to, check in with the other schools around you, or grocery stores or restaurants in your area. Ask, who are the farms that they're buying from. I would also suggest, go to the farmers markets. It's a great place to connect with farmers. A lot of emerging farmers in our state are selling at farmers markets currently. And so that could be a great place to kind of start those initial conversations. And you can also strike up conversations around town at places of worship, nonprofit and cultural organizations, or different community events. As I mentioned, you can buy from food hubs. So reach out if you're close to the Good Acre and Falcon Heights, or Sprout and Little Falls. Those are two food hubs that are working with many farms around them. And then, as I mentioned, there are several farmers markets around the state that are aggregating product. And so the Minnesota Farmers Market Hub page also has a map that shows where they're operating food hubs at markets, and they have an online ordering system as well. And so those market hubs could be a great resource if there's one in your area. And then I'll encourage you to just reach out to different farm to school supporters or connectors in your area. If you're looking for advice on how to connect with farmers in your area, or if you're looking for, a specific farm that's selling something, your local statewide health improvement partnership coordinators, your SHIP coordinators, they may have connections with farms. Similarly, University of Minnesota Extension educators and SNAP Ed educators, many of them are supporting farm to school in their communities. There's also a variety of different organizations across the state that work with farmers and can be a wealth of resources for how to connect with farms in your area. And then there's also the Farm to School Leadership Team, which I'm a member of, as well as Erin and others on the call today. And we are working at a state level to support Farm to School. And so please, reach out to us. We also have technical assistance office hours every month, which Erin's going to share about later on, and we can support you there. So there's existing resources to help you if you're looking to reach out to new farms. And then the link here, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has a page on suggestions and strategies for connecting with emerging farmers, including some that I shared today. But that's a great website to go to. And there's many organizations and community connectors listed on that site that you could reach out to help in kind of those initial steps to build relationships with farms. I'll also note that we will be asking in the application, how did you or do you plan to identify farms and small businesses that you'll work with for this grant? And so especially for the full tray, we'll be looking for, for letters of support from farms that you plan to work with. But I'll also say it's okay if you don't have every single farm identified, and I think there's opportunity to really try to build those relationships gradually. So get some letters of support, reach out to farms, make some plans for how you'll do it, but keep the door open for making connections with new farms through the winter, which is a great time to connect with farmers. But for the letters of support for full tray applicants, we are looking for at least one letter of support from a producer who will benefit from your proposal that you are putting in your application. And then if you do plan to be purchasing from a distributor, we're looking for an additional letter of support that shows, how that demonstrates that they have plans for how they'll be working with Minnesota farms to source products for you. Those letters of support can be, like a typed up letter on letterhead. And that's likely, if you've applied in the past, the type of letter you've submitted. But this year we are accepting some different formats. So, it can be an email that the farmer or your distributor sends to you, and you can upload that. And it also could be a handwritten note. And so we want these letters of support to not be too much of a burden or a hindrance for farms that you're working with, and hopefully it's a smooth process. But the intent is really just to show that you have thought as an applicant how you will be reaching out to farms near you, starting to build those connections, and having a positive impact on Minnesota agriculture. So with that, I am going to pass it to Kathy from Cross Lake Community School, who was a fiscal year 2021 First Bite grant recipient. And Kathy is going to share a little bit about their grant. So I'll pass it to you, Kathy. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. I am sitting in our school in Cross Lake, Minnesota, which is north of Brainerd, and I what would like to call God's country. And our school is a very small charter school, also public, and we have pre-K through 8th grade housed in our building. And behind me, you can see I'm sitting in our solarium, which we have aquaponics and some raised beds that we are working on growing produce to be able to use in our lunch and serve the kids, hopefully in the next coming couple months. We got the grant last year, and it was my first time really. The school has only been here since 2018. I was lucky to be able to start the food service program from ground zero, so it's been a lot of fun but a little bit challenging. So we jumped on board and got the grant, and I started working with some of the local farmers, and I was able to source some local apples so we could do the apple crunch, and we got to try the first Kiss apple that was made at the University of Minnesota, and they have them in Aiken. It's at Gilby's Apple Orchard, and he also had some squash that we purchased from them. And then I connected with a couple other farmers around the area. I was able to buy some eggs, some beef, and then I also connected with Sprout. Kate mentioned them a little bit earlier. They are in Little Falls, which is not too far from here. It's about an hour. So I really was able to get a lot of different things from them. I have purchased cauliflower, broccoli, romaine lettuce, cucumbers, tomatoes, oatmeal, blue cornmeal. Oh gosh, watermelon, as you can see right here on the screen. Everything here was from them except for the red and yellow peppers. We purchased those from our distributor, and then of course sour cream and salsa. But we were able to get green peppers, we were able to get tomatoes, lettuce, the watermelon. So pretty much it was a Minnesota lunch that day. I will have to say it is a little bit of work to do farm to school. It's not, you don't just punch in your numbers into the computer and order it from your regular distributors. So there is a little bit of work behind the scenes. But once you do get a good connection, like Kate had mentioned too, that's really is the key. If you can find, working with Sprout is much easier than probably, trying to find a farmer, but there's a lot of them out there that you can work with. The couple that I came up with that I have been working with have been very, resourceful and helpful. I really think it's definitely worth your time. Like I said, it is a little bit of extra time, but I think the outcome for the kids and to be able to say that, hey, this came from Minnesota. We also actually had some orange watermelon, and the kids were like, what on earth is this? Well, it was kind of a yellowish orange, and I had never tasted it before either. So it was kind of something new for me too. And it was actually pretty good. I was kind of surprised. I was a little bit hesitant, but the kids were like, when we had the next watermelon that was normal color, they were like, where's the other stuff? That was really good. So it's kind of fun to see them try something new too and kind of get out of their comfort zone. We also tried a squash that you keep the peeling on, and I kind of cut it up and put a little bit of olive oil and garlic pepper on it, and you get to eat it. You just kind of eat it. It gets kind of crunchy. It's almost like an onion ring. And we tried that last year, and a lot of the kids were very cautious about trying it, but then we did have it, and then I served it again 2 more times after that, and I was surprised on how many kids said, oh, that was really good. I'll have some more the next time we had it. So I think that that's really the big thing is trying to get them interested in things that they maybe wouldn't have tried other ways. And I really do just think it's a great way to be able to put a little bit more different things on your menu, and it does help with having the extra cash from the grant. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was great. And it sounds like you've bought some really great and a really nice variety of things with your First Bite grant. So thanks for sharing that with the group. Next, I'm going to pass it to Maria from Roseville area schools, who they received a full tray grant in the fiscal year 2021 grant round, as well as some previous ones. And Maria will share about their grant. So I'll pass it to you, Maria. Thanks.
Hi there, everyone. Maria, I'm our nutrition coordinator with Roseville area schools and St. Anthony New Brighton School District. I'm first just going to start telling a little bit about our district. We have students from 8 metro communities. We serve about 8,000 or more than 8,000 students a day across 16 different sites. Roseville and St. Anthony are really diverse, vibrant communities. I think it's amazing. We have over 82 languages other than English spoken at home. And when we look how farm to school fits into our community, we really try to use our farm to school products as also a way to introduce some cuisines that are more culturally relevant or appealing to all our households. And then we also operate 5 federal nutrition programs. So we operate all through the summer. We operate the CACFP after school program, lunch and breakfast, and some of our sites are also receiving the fresh fruit and vegetable grant program. Over the years, we have been fortunate to receive many different farm to school grants. So we have been equipment grant recipients. We've been milk cooler grant recipients. I had forgotten about those until Kate mentioned those. During the COVID years, we received the rapid response grants, which really helped us keep local foods in our food boxes that we were sending home to families when we weren't learning in school. And then the last 2 years, we have been recipients of the full tray grants along with some equipment matching for this coming year. So when I think about how we're accelerating farm to school or where to start. I think everyone's in the right place if you're looking towards the MDA grant. So we've certainly utilized funds from MDA. We have also worked with the USDA and then also using private funding. There's a lot of other nonprofit grants out there that might not be labeled farm to school, but when you look at where they want their funding to go, it can be a really great place to put more funds into your farm to school programming, especially when you're looking for funds that aren't just to reimburse food purchases. So maybe marketing or different types of equipment, maybe some technology pieces. Looking at some of those funds outside of the USDA and MDA can be really helpful so that you can spend your food funds from your budget and not be worrying about stretching your budget because you've been able to support it with other marketing funds from other grants. When I think about where we've started with farm to school, I also think starting small is really key. It can be really exciting to see like big picture and just like want to jump right in there. And we've certainly done that for some things and then accepted that we should have taken a step back and started even smaller than we thought we needed to. So I think the apple crunch is always a great one, focusing on just purchasing local apples from an apple orchard one day a year and put a lot of hype into that one day. Apples are a great no prep item. We just need to wash them, maybe slice them, and that can be a great place to start. We also utilized grant funding to host a cucumber crunch in July. And I think sometimes summer, we often think, we don't have as many students, so it might not be a great time to do farm to school. But if you're serving students during the summer, I think summer can be a great time because I often find in the admin side, we have less on our plate. And so if you can squeeze in a cucumber crunch as your one-time farm to school event of the year, you might have more time in the summer than if you are trying to squeeze something in October, because I know the start of school can get crazy. And then also utilizing resources that are already there. Harvest of the Month from MDA and Extension. Last year when those resources came out, my director and I kind of looked at each other and were like, we are no longer reinventing the wheel. We are just using Harvest of the Month materials. And that has saved us time and also helped with planning, kind of already a guideline of where we're going and what we need to purchase moving forward. I also think it's really important to look at how you're going to set up your team for success. So communicating to your school community and but also your staff members. Later, I'll show a example of how we started to really break down communication for our managers of what exactly needs to happen on our farm to school days. So through our grants, we've increased Minnesota Thursdays to being the first Thursday of the month to now being twice a month. And so we've really needed to make sure we're communicating really clearly. And that's something that I've had to learn and to work on, of where these foods are coming from and how we're prepping them and what managers are responsible of purchasing and what the district is working on. And with that needs to come your training and also sharing our why. So if we go to the next slide, Kate, this is just an example of a really specific, this is this Thursday, it's Mega Meatball Thursday for our Minnesota Thursday. And this is a communication example that goes out to our managers a few weeks before. And it really just breaks down every menu item, because usually our staff are used to maybe getting all their items from your prime vendor and maybe bread from your other vendor. But they're used to everything coming from one place, and that's not going to be the case when you're working with local products. So I'm letting them know, okay, this Mega Meatball, I've ordered them the beef. How's it going to get to them? Who's bringing it? And then if there's any production notes or tips and tricks for the recipe. Going down to like the roasted broccoli and cauliflower. Broccoli had a really rough year, so I'm only able to order local cauliflower. So our managers are responsible for ordering broccoli from our prime vendor, but they're going to be getting local cauliflower. It's from a new farmer, so I noted that in the communication. I'm letting them know when it's delivered. And then also part of that why is we're including some food science notes. So why we want the vegetables to turn a little bit brown and why that's a good thing. And that brings out that sweet flavor and decreasing the bitterness of the vegetables through that Maillard reaction. We used a food science note also when we make fresh biscuits to make sure that our staff know that we need to move quickly and why cold buttermilk and hot butter need to come together. So it's not just a communicating of why out to your family and your PTO and your superintendent of the importance of all of this, but also for your staff members. Kate, you can go to the next slide. Great. So something also is just communicating again to everyone. You don't want to do all this hard work because like Kathy said, it is a little bit more challenging than just entering those numbers. So making sure you're communicating out to your kids so your kids know what's going on, your parents and your staff members. And it's been really nice having that MDA grant, being able to use that as a marketing. We receive that. That's why we're choosing to spend more on some of our food items because we have support from the Department of Ag to be able to purchase our local poultry, our local wheat, our local wild rice. Also making sure you're telling your story outward so that your farmers and your producers can see what's going on. We've had a lot of farmers, farmers are busy farming and they've reached out saying it's so nice when you tag us on social media because it's an easy win for them also. They don't have to go through and make a post about selling to schools. If we can do it for them, it's a win-win for us and for those farmers as well. And then my last slide here is just a picture of some of our meals served with our local products. So we've tried some new chicken yassa and roasted sweet potatoes with a jollof rice that's in the bottom right, our mega meatball up on top, watermelon, the favorite Ferndale hot dog, and of course a turkey Thanksgiving meal in the bottom left-hand corner with some local wild rice from the Red Lake Indian Reservation. So that's all I've got from Roseville and St. Anthony.
Gosh, those look like delicious lunches. Thanks so much. Thank you to both of our presenters today. So I'm going to share a little bit just about what we've heard from previous grantees. You got to hear directly from them. I've also been working with Extension, U of M Extension, to do some more formal evaluation activities. And we are really excited about, because there's going to be such an increase in funding this year, we can capture some of that data about what happens when this real investment is put back into communities, back into local farms. So we'll continue doing that, but we'll share a little bit of feedback from what we've seen in these grants previously. So this is a really cool little chart that our partner Ryan from Extension put together. You can see we heard from both of our presenters today that apples are low-hanging fruit. If you're going to do farm to school, if you're thinking about applying for that First Bite grant, you would not be alone. There are many grantees that have used the funding from this grant to support purchases of apples. Carrots are also really popular, but you can see there are a lot of different types of foods that are being purchased. Another thing that we saw is that there are many fruits and vegetables being purchased, but we're seeing more proteins, more different local meats and things like that being purchased as well. So remember, you can think outside, think of all parts of your tray, and you can use local purchasing for those. And I think Kate covered this really well, just to highlight that you can purchase directly from farmers. You can also go through your regular distribution company that you already have a relationship with and just talk to them about, hey, what local items do you have? And connect that way. And you can also use a food hub. Definitely, if you have one that's local, that can be a really easy way to connect with farmers. So just keep in mind, it's not just direct purchasing. You can look at different ways of purchasing. And then I just wanted to share what we're hearing from grantees about why this is important to them. And I thought maybe a little bit outside of what you might think of. I mean, of course, people mention the health benefits, mention supporting local farms and things like that. But I thought this was really interesting. We heard about using your purchasing power to express your values. And especially thinking about when you're using public money, public funding like this, you often have to go with lower costs, but this kind of farm to school funding lets you think about where it's grown, how it's grown, and think about more values than just what the cost is. I think that's really powerful. And then for some people too, especially in the last couple of years when the supply chain has been a little bit unreliable, they've been able to get local items, and actually because of that shorter supply chain, they can get certain items that they can't get when they're trying to purchase from the big brands. So having that shorter food supply chain, having the connection with where your food is coming from really helps with actually being able to get the food. So I think that's really good to keep in mind. I've heard that from a couple different grantees. And then other benefits that we've heard from grantees, I think this was really interesting. So trying to build that community buy-in. And I think that what Maria was highlighting about promoting the good work that you're doing is really key, because this can be a way to really link with your community. And I loved this quote that we heard from a previous grantee, that local products actually can draw school leaders into the cafeteria to try school meals. And on Minnesota Thursdays, they had a group from the administration that would come and have hot lunch at one of their schools every month. They would experience their meals. The students got to see the leadership from the school district, and they even invited other local leaders like commissioners and senators to come see their meals in action. So that's super awesome. I've also heard that they were able to get their kitchen staff to have more buy-in to their jobs and more satisfaction with their jobs. So they feel more engaged, they're learning new things and trying new ingredients, and that makes them excited about coming to work. And then just personally, building a connection with the kids. And I really love this quote too. Somebody said that the kids started talking to her about the food that she was preparing. They would come up and they would communicate about what they wanted to see. And she said, I'm now someone who is approachable. It's good to see the lunch lady outside because they only see that top half of us. So they became real people to the students. I think that that is really important and something that it might be a little bit of a hidden benefit for participating in farm to school. And then of course, the next slide just talking about the economic impact. So it's not just that direct purchase that you're making, but you're supporting other inputs to that local business. So when you purchase from something that's not local, that money is going out of your community. But if you keep it in your community, there's a multiplier effect that has benefits beyond just that individual purchase. So for thinking about what support is available to you, you can get engaged if you want to in kind of promoting this grant and making sure that it's sustainable. If you want to send me an email, I can get you on the list to kind of be engaged about advocating for this, to support this program, because it's so powerful. And the next slide, I wanted to highlight, we mentioned before the farm to school office hours, and especially at this time when the grant deadline is coming up, we will be devoting our office hour time to supporting you in your thinking about applying and kind of planning. We have one that's set for October 12th, and then we also have one that's set for November 9th. They are the second Wednesday of the month at 2:30. It's an hour long. Anybody is welcome. You can ask questions about your own farm to school program. You can ask about the application for the grant itself as well. And we can try to give you some advice about framing or how you might think about your plan to make it align with the intent of this grant. And also, you can look in your own community. There's probably a MDH SHIP coordinator, if you're familiar with them. Some of them have offered on the office hours to actually help with grant writing. Not all of them have capacity to do that, but that just might be somebody who's a resource for you. And also SNAP educators can help, probably not with grant writing, but potentially with connecting with farmers. They could potentially help with that. And then the other thing that I just wanted to say is we also have a website there's MDA's official website, which has all the official information about the grant, but we also host a website, farmtoschoolmn.org, where we are gonna have this webinar, a recording of this webinar, other resources to help with farm to school, and then an FAQ list there as well. And Kate, you were going to share just a little bit about the harvest of the month before we go to Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. I just wanted to put a quick plug in for Minnesota Harvest of the Month. Maria mentioned it, that Roseville area schools is using it. So if you haven't heard about it, Minnesota Harvest of the Month is a new education and marketing program that MDA in collaboration with MDE and Extension now offer to any school across the state. So the website that's listed here, if you go there, you can learn a little bit more about Harvest of the Month, and then from there you can access the Google site where there are for all of the Harvest of the Month foods, there are lesson plans that you can use. You can order free printed posters and clings for your salad bar, and recipe cards that you can send home in student backpacks or have at a family night. And all of these printed materials are completely free. We also have stickers, which I know are always very popular with kids. And so the Harvest of the Month program is designed to be flexible. So there isn't a specific food item assigned to each month, but we have 12 different foods. And you can kind of choose which food you want to highlight when, but it's really just meant to kind of help build connections between the cafeteria, classroom, and community, and help you market and promote and build excitement around the local foods that you're serving. So think of Harvest of the Month as that, your support in promoting the great work you're doing. It could be a great connection, for grant applications as you think about your project and what foods you want to focus on. So make sure to check out that website.
Great. And then we have a couple questions that have come in on the Q&A. So we're going to spend the last few minutes here getting to as many of those as we can. So feel free to keep typing them in there. If we don't get to them all, we'll post the answers also afterwards on MDA's website. I think you guys are obligated to share all your answers, right? So we had 2 questions from Dee and Kristen about what types of items are eligible to be purchased. Can they get broths that are processed with locally grown beef and pork? And then also, would a local Minnesota turkey roast that they could get through their distributor be eligible? And I'll put that towards maybe Emily.
Hey, yes. So the focus of the grants this year is minimally processed or unprocessed. So brats, as long as there are not like fillers in there, then they would be eligible. Hot dogs, because they have fillers and other products that have been added to them, those items would not be eligible. If you have any questions as you're putting your application together about specific food items, certainly reach out to us. The other question was about Ferndale turkey purchased through a distributor. So yeah, that would be an eligible food product. When you're filling out your application, you would just need to work with your distributor to have them identify that they're working with Ferndale, and Ferndale is the local farm. They're located in this city, and sort of provide that information in your application.
And I do know Ferndale turkey is a very popular farm to school item for sure. And I think, Maria, I thought you might be a good person to answer this next question about how this farm to school grant funding interacts with other types of funding that you have for your meals. So, because you had mentioned that you do the fresh fruit and vegetable program. And so with this program, how does that interact? Is it on top of the food from the fresh fruit and vegetable program, or is it replacing that food? And I'll just say, I think you cannot get double funding for items, right?
Right. Correct. Yeah. So it would be more like just thinking of it as like separate buckets of where we're pulling funding from. We do use local products in our FFVP programming, but we are reimbursed through FFVP, not through the MDA grant. But it can be helpful for if we're getting squash from a farmer for our menu item, and that's going to be used for our grant funding, but tagging on carrots, let's say, for our FFVP, like if we want to be getting a large enough quantity to get delivery just for FFVP carrots, but tacking it on maybe to the same farmer and then just teasing out the expenses to either FFVP or the farm or the grant.
Mm-hmm. So maybe supplementing, you can use that fresh fruit and vegetable money for the vegetables and then use your farm to school money for something that wouldn't be able to be covered by that farm to school or the fresh fruit and vegetable funding. And then it doesn't mean that you get more fruit and vegetables like on the side of a regular meal. You use it to actually get the components of the meal that are already part of the normal meal pattern. So it is integrated into that meal pattern.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then similar to that, I see too, a second part of that question is, would the fruits and vegetables still be subject to the standard nutritional compliance? And the answer would be yes. You still are serving the regular meal pattern that is, the meal program is administered by MDE. We don't have one of our MDE friends on the line, but they would tell you that, yes, you still have to follow the rules and you would use it as part of that meal program. And then I think similar to that, we had a question that we answered written as well. But then someone also asked, does that deduct from or lower the reimbursement that you would be getting as a participant in the regular school lunch program? And no, it does not, right? It's actually on top of that funding. So you'd be getting that reimbursement from MDE just like usual. This is extra money that can support you to do additional purchasing or maybe get something that would be out of reach if you didn't have that extra boost. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've kind of set, when we look at using our farm to school funds, like how, what percentage more of our items are we willing to pay for a local item? And that's going to vary for every operator in every school district. But we've kind of set that percentage for us for different items. And then we are okay with knowing, we're usually spending maybe 18 cents per serving of a vegetable when we're purchasing from our prime vendor, but we're willing to go, 25% to 30% more for a local item.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the intent, go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
I just wanted to note, I did see in the comments that one of the questions was also around, they referenced that they work with CKC Foods. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to note that if you do have a food service management company that you work with, that yes, you are able to apply, and you'll see this in the FAQ and the grant application. Just, make sure that before you apply, that you coordinate with your staff through your food service management company, to say like, we're interested in applying for this, how can we use this? Just so that they're in the loop and involved in the plans, but that you certainly are eligible to apply if you work with a food service management company.
Yes, thank you. And I know we're right at time. We just have 2 questions. I think maybe we could get them really quick here, if that's okay. So one person asked about, can I buy local Red Lake wild rice from a food vendor? Is that okay to buy it through Reinhardt to be reimbursed through this program? Yes, that is okay. That would be awesome. And that's an eligible item as well. And then a question about Harvest of the Month. Kate, maybe you would be the right person. Is that only for participants in the school meal program?
Yeah, great question. It's just, the resources are free and available online. And so anyone operating, any school meal program, they're welcome to go and use those resources. The most important thing is we just want them to be used and help educate and excite kids about local foods. So there's no specific, meal program participation requirement.
Awesome. And if you have more questions that we didn't get to today, please do register, sign up for those office hours, come next week, and you can even get into the weeds about your plan for applying or your plan to purchase. We can help you with logistics and stuff. We can do more than we can on this webinar, and we would be happy to help you But we're so excited to have all of you here. We're excited about the enthusiasm around Farm to School, and especially that we have this huge boost in funding. So if you're on the fence, if you're considering applying, it's an awesome year to apply. Tell your friends, do apply if you're thinking about it. I think it's a really good time to apply, but we are really excited to support you to do that. And thanks for joining us today. Thank you so much for my co-presenters, especially to our previous grantees, Maria and Kathy, for joining us today as well. And have a good rest of your day.